Today we're going to talk about taxonomy and the classification of living things. Now, classification is a basic arrangement. This can be living and non-living things. This is organizing socks, maybe by color. This could be organizing shoes by size, by left and right foot. But the focus here, classification can be living or non-living. But taxonomy is specific to living things. It's a science of grouping and naming living organisms. Now, a taxonomist is a scientist that focuses and identifies and names living organisms. An early taxonomist, John Ray, was a botanist, which meant he studied plants. He was one of the first to use Latin in naming. Latin is going to be the language that we're going to focus on for taxonomy. His names were very long descriptions in Latin. So instead of giving it a name, he would describe size, color, length, and so forth, pattern. So this was a very long description, very hard to classify everything, all these different species. Now you have Carolus Linnaeus. Now Linnaeus is the one you need to know. Linnaeus is the father of taxonomy. He classified organisms by a structure. He developed binomial nomenclature. Now, remember the prefix, you want to find a prefix here, bi meaning two. So binomial nomenclature means a two naming system. So nomenclature referring to naming, and so this is a two-word naming system. Now, the two-word naming system of binomial nomenclature is called the scientific name. This includes the genus and the species name of the organism. These two names are the most specific. So why do we classify organisms? The focus here is that we want to represent a relationship between the organisms, things that are similar. So we're going to put dogs in a certain category, cats in a certain category. We're going to separate plants from animals. So plants will all be in a certain category, while animals will be in a certain category. We will base them based on similarities. So why is it so important to have Latin and not use the common name? So let's take a look at this animal. What is it? It's a mountain lion, right? If you go to a different area, people would call it a mountain lion, but if you go to a different area, people would call it a cougar. But if you go to a different area, maybe a puma. So up north, they may call it a mountain lion, or out west. Down south, they may call it a cougar. But those common names are all correct. But we can't just assume that if we go to a certain region, point out a common name, that they can understand it or be able to represent it, that they would be able to recognize it. So that's why no matter what area of the United States, no matter what country we go to, we have the same name. We have the same scientific name, and that's why we're using Latin and we use scientific name. So we should not use common names to classify. So binomial nomenclature is referring to two names. So we are going to write the genus name and the species name. One example of that would be the red robin, the red-breasted robin, and that's Turdus, which is the genus name. You can see it's capitalized with the T, and then Migratorius, which is the species name. And you can see the species name is completely lowercase. It's going to be written in Latin or Greek. You can recognize Turdus migratorius is not a common English word. It's then going to be italicized or slanted. But that's if I'm typing it. Yes, dad. Let me get my video done. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to capitalize the genus name. You can see the T is capitalized, but the M is not. But if I'm writing it, it's going to be so hard to italicize something. So all I'm going to do is underline it if I'm going to write it out. Now we're going to focus on hierarchy. Hierarchy is referring to the levels, which one's bigger, which one's smaller. Now we're going to start with the domain, which is the broadest taxon, which is the broadest group of classification. Now species is the most specific. Now I'm going to have you memorize these, And one way to remember this and memorize this is to create a mnemonic device. I really encourage you to do this so that you can remember it in order. Now here's the mnemonic device that I came up with. This is a common one, starting with domain to species. And many times, some schools, some resources don't include domain, they just start with the kingdom. But here's one mnemonic device, and that's taking the first letter of the word and creating a new word out of it. And then you create a sentence that makes sense. Does King Philip come over for good soup? So I took the first letter of domain and I created a new word, okay, K, okay, and so on. So you can create your own mnemonic device. I'm going to have you guys try that on Monday. We're going to review with binomial nomenclature. Which two are more closely related? Look at the genus and species name. You can see that the polar bear has the genus Ursus, and so does the grizzly bear. So therefore, they are going to be more closely related. So these are the scientific names, okay? And let's talk a little bit about the scientific name, and then we'll call it quits for today. And here we have a breakdown of kingdom Animalia all the way down to the species, and we can see that the polar bear and the grizzly bear are similar, and then as we get more specific, we're able to separate them. So you can actually see the breakdown of similarities. We start off with, we have all animals. We have mammals from the bear to the squirrel, but then we have snakes, and then we have echinoderms, such as the sea star. But then when we break that down to all animals with a nerve cord, we remove the sea star because the sea star is an invertebrate. It doesn't have a backbone, okay, and a central nerve cord. Then we move down to mammals, carnivores, and as we move down to carnivores, we get rid of the squirrel. So you can see this is the breakdown of these animals. Now, one tool that allows scientists to determine the identity of organisms is a dichotomous key. Remember, we're looking at the prefix. Here we have the prefix di. Di also means two. Just like bi and di both refer to the number 2. This is going to be a key that is going to be divided into 2 parts. It's kind of like one of those books that you read. My daughter, Ella, she's reading a book and she said, "Oh, I have this wonderful book, this awesome book. It's so interesting." And I get to one point and I can choose to go to page 39 if I want to go through the forest, or if I want to go into the castle, I can go to page 76. That is a choice. She has a choice to go one way or the other way. So there's 2 choices here. In the same way, a dichotomous key will give you 2 choices in order to go to the next step. Here's a basic example. Okay, here we have bacteria. Nucleus or no nucleus. Okay, prokaryotes, no nucleus, so we will choose bacteria. Okay, now protist. Let's start at the top. No nucleus or nucleus. Okay, it does have a nucleus. Now we can go to the second one. So we're choosing 2. Okay, protist, is it multicellular or unicellular? Okay, so it has a nucleus, but it's going to be single-celled, unicellular. So we're going to stop there at protist. Plants. Okay, it has a nucleus. We go to the next one. It's multicellular. We go to the next one. It's a producer. So this is a basic idea of a dichotomous key. Here's another example. Here we see the key is set up into 2 parts. And basically, by reading the description, you can choose the name. Here's another example. This is the most common example of a dichotomous key. This is basically the dichotomous key that we will be using. We'll be doing some labs dealing with. So if we go ahead and take a look at, let's do on the right side, we have a squid, snail, clam. Let's take a look at the snail, letter B. Okay, so let's go up to number 1. We have 2 choices, A and B. Is there a shell, external shell present, or external shell not present? We look at the snail. Yes, there is one present. We go to number 2. Does the shell consist of 2 parts or 1 part, a single? Okay, it only consists of a single part, so that would be class Gastropoda. Yes, a snail is part of class Gastropoda. Gastro meaning stomach, pod meaning foot. So it's basically a stomach foot. That's a snail. If we look at the dragonfly, try and do this on your own. Try and look through this. A, wings that are covered by a hard outside skeleton? No. Wings that are freely observable? Yes. For the dragonfly, we're going to go to step 3. Let's look at A and B. Okay, A, the wings point out from the outside? Yes. That's going to be the dragonfly. Now, there are 3 basic domains. The first one is going to be bacteria. And bacteria is broken up into 2 types, and that's archaea bacteria and eubacteria. So archaea bacteria and basic bacteria. Now, archaea and bacteria are unicellular prokaryotes, prokaryot referring to not having a nucleus, and so it still has DNA but no nucleus. Now, eukarya, which is the third one, is referring to having a nucleus. These are the eukaryotes. They have a nucleus, they have membrane-bound organelles. So in the past, we just had 2 domains. We had bacteria and eukarya, but more recently we have bacteria divided into 2 types, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. So let's focus on bacteria. Okay, the first domain, archaea. Now, archaea bacteria, this is not archaea, but archaea bacteria, this is going to be bacteria living in harsh environments. Now, according to evolutionists, these are going to be the bacteria, because they live in harsh environments, that evolutionists believe that they evolved first. So they can survive harsh environments such as hot springs, even up in certain areas of the atmosphere where there is no oxygen, being anaerobic, volcano vents, in different harsh environments. These bacteria can survive very hot and very cold places. Here's a picture of archaea bacteria. So scientists, specifically evolutionists, identify this bacteria as not created differently or specifically by God, but it evolved first and then it changed to eubacteria. Now, eubacteria would be your basic bacteria. Bacteria that it can be harmful, but it's more common in present day, more common in normal everyday environments. Okay, found in all habitats except for the harsh ones, and that would be the archaea bacteria. Bacteria are known for being decomposers. They are used in a good manner or a good way to make cheese and yogurt, and tanning leather, but they can definitely be harmful, causing botulism and different diseases. There's going to be 3 types of bacteria you're going to learn next week or in about 2 weeks, and that is going to be, this is the rod-shaped bacteria called bacillus. There's circular bacteria called coccus, and spirillum and vibros. But there's 3 main ones, the coccus, bacillus, and spirillum. Now let's talk about eukaryotes. The domain eukarya is divided into kingdoms. Kingdom Protista, fungi, plants, and animals. So Protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia. Now protists are unicellular, meaning one-celled, and they are autotrophic, or at least most of them are, meaning they make their own. Now, most of them are heterotrophic, meaning they consume and eat other things, but some of them can be autotrophic, meaning they can make their own food using maybe photosynthesis or gases. But protists are going to be aquatic, meaning they live in water environments. And here's some pictures here at the bottom. Now let's focus on fungi. Fungi are mainly multicellular. There is one multicellular fungi that we're going to focus on, and that's yeast. So yeast, even though it's a eukaryote, it can be, well, it is unicellular. Now, fungi are heterotrophs, but they're more described as saprophytes, meaning they live off the dead, and they secrete enzymes first, and then they ingest. So this is pretty interesting, to where we put the food in our body first, so we ingest as humans, and then inside our stomach we digest. Fungi, on the other hand, they do the opposite. They digest first, then they suck it up. It's as if you had your food on your plate and you threw up all on the food, it digested, and then you put your hands in the mush, and then you sucked it up in your fingers. That's how fungi work. Now, fungi do have cell walls. That's why a lot of plants actually, that's why a long time ago before the 1950s, a lot of people thought that fungi were plants. Okay, they look like plants. They have a cell wall, and that cell wall has a durable carbohydrate called chitin. We don't pronounce the ch, but it's chitin. And fungi don't have green cells. Okay, so they don't have chloroplasts, so they are not in the same category as plants. Even though a long time ago, fungi were in the same kingdom as plants, now they're not. Now we move to plants. Plants are multicellular. They are eukaryotic, meaning they have a nucleus, but they are phototrophic. So they use the process of photosynthesis. Photo meaning light. So they get their food from the production of light, absorbing sunlight to make sugar. They store their sugar in their roots, and we're going to learn the process and the equation of photosynthesis. Now, they also have a cell wall just like fungi, but instead of chitin, they have cellulose. Now, the last one here is kingdom Animalia. Animalia, just like plants, are going to be multicellular eukaryotes, but how they're different from fungi is they ingest first and then digest second. So they're ingestive heterotrophs when they eat. Here's a chart that organizes the 5 kingdoms, technically 6 if we separate bacteria into eubacteria and archaeobacteria. A long time ago, they just had bacteria in one kingdom, and they called that Monera. So it was 5 kingdoms. Now it's technically 6 kingdoms because we don't use Monera. So if you do search on the internet, you may see kingdom Monera as bacteria. But now we say archaeobacteria versus eubacteria. So all the information we just kind of talked about, as well as some examples, I put this on a chart for you. We're going to actually use this chart for the rest of the year. We're going to go step by step, kingdom by kingdom, throughout the second semester, right before summer. Here's a focus on specifically just the eukaryotes. So bacteria is excluded. So just the eukaryotes having a nucleus.